So I'm really kicking off today with a sense of ambition, of drive and dreams, because this is really where we want to be. We want to be in a world where women are taking their equal share of leadership and decision making in the equity market. And in banking too, of course, though we know perhaps that's a set of other challenges, and we will be talking about those today too. But for women who are in investment, and we've had some fantastic introductions about the policies and practices that have already been put in place by the European Commission and the EIF. We have all of us been working, and as I said last night in my few words, pushing the boulder up the hill to try to actually really change the system. And there are women in this audience today, and three amazing women on my panel who've really been taking action to really make change, to really make a difference, and to also understand what that difference is. So it's an exciting moment for us to reflect on where we are, but also where we could go, and what would it mean for the investment market and for women founders if we really could make that change and achieve women having that really strong and hopefully equal share of not just the capital itself to deploy, but also the roles of that deployment. So I'm delighted to say today that I have three wonderful women. One of them is Gurpreet Manku, who is CEO of Level 20. Level 20, as you may know, is the leading leadership organisation that is actually representing women in both venture capital and private equity and doing fantastic research, and we'll be drawing on that knowledge and insight from GURPS today. Secondly, I think I have someone here who many of you may know, Kinga Stanislawska, who is actually herself leading European women in VC, and has herself been leading a major VC in Poland. So I can't have anyone better with me today who has the insight, the knowledge and experience of what women are doing on the ground, and also the perspectives that women are taking in her community, not to mention her own experience of fund management. So I think that will be a very exciting person to hear from today. And thirdly, I'm delighted to have Angela Holter, who many of you may also have met before. Angela's leading the power up there in Norway and the Nordics, and can tell you about her own perspectives on that area and region of Europe that we all perhaps think we know a lot about, maybe we don't, and the work that Angela's been doing to create change for women in early stage investments. So with that and my wonderful panel, I'm going to turn to you now, GURPS, because GURPS, you have been, and I say GURPS, Gurpreet, but GURPS is a very long-standing friend of mine who's been called GURPS by me for many years. But Gurpreet, just for everyone's knowledge, would you mind just giving us a little bit of insight from the research that you've done at Level 20? What is the current position for women in leadership across Europe? And also, how does it vary across different regions of Europe? And what are you seeing in terms of people's actions? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny. And yes, you can all call me GURPS. That's my nickname. I've had it since I was a child, and it's also shorter to type. So at Level 20, it's an organisation that's been running for over 10 years now. And one of the first initiatives it pulled together was looking at the data that showed the representation of women, particularly in investment roles. That data didn't exist before. I know many of you have tried and worked on pulling those lists and those data sets together, and it's very time-consuming work. We now have a data set of over 20,000 investment professionals. The numbers I'm going to give you today were published a couple of years ago, and we're in the process of updating that data set, and we'll publish our European report at the end of September, so please look out for that. That will cover 19 European countries. But out of the data set that we currently have, it shows us that the overall representation of women in senior investment roles is 14%. and that includes roles at MD and above, so that includes partner roles as well. We appreciate that doesn't always correlate with equity in a business, but for us, given what we're trying to do, it's helpful to have that information nonetheless. Countries that are doing quite well are the UK at 15%, France, which is the leader at 18%, and Sweden at 17%. I shared some of these numbers last night, and many of you said that's still not great. But trust me, these numbers were in the single digits not so long ago, so there has been a lot of improvement in recent years. Countries that are behind include Denmark at 7%, Netherlands at 9%, and Germany at 10%. And so those are at the senior investment role levels. When you look at the aggregate pool of women in investment teams, overall representation levels are higher. It's around now 1 in 4 investment team members across Europe is a woman. It was much lower than that a few years ago. We don't have the data, so we can't really compare. But again, countries like France and Sweden are getting towards a third. And again, those countries where you don't see many women in leadership roles still have team numbers are very low, below 20% in all those cases. When you look across private equity and venture capital, VC does do better. So you see more women in venture at all levels. The senior figure in PE is just 11%, and at venture level it's 19%, so there's a marked difference there. And then you also see that at mid and junior levels as well, there's an increase there as well. And there are a number of reasons for that. There are many more smaller funds, there are more new funds in the industry, there are more female-led funds that have been created in recent years which have moved those numbers up. It might also just be a more attractive industry that women want to participate in compared to private equity. But we also think that it's changing. So when we look across our data set, there are many more women in the industry now than there ever were before. When we pull the data together, we also spend a lot of time in market talking to the industry to understand what the challenges are, what the opportunities are. And there are many, and we could spend quite a long time talking about it all, and I'm conscious not to go over. The first point that often comes up is family leave. People used to say to me, women have children, they don't come back. Our data doesn't show that, and everyone's experience it doesn't resonate with that as well. And we've now published various reports at a pan-European country level which set out market information on levels of maternity, paternity leave taken, shared parental leave taken. And we're encouraging the industry to utilise that, to look at their own policies. But what's also been really helpful is people in deal-doing roles talking about how they do it. So sharing their stories, sharing tips with the wider ecosystem, that's been incredibly powerful. And it's also an important area to get men involved in the conversation as well, because we speak to many fathers who want to be able to manage the demands of an intensive career that often involves long hours, lots of travel, but also manage family life at the same time. This year we've also had a big theme which is around sponsorship. Now we have a mentoring program which is successful in retaining women in the industry and helping them to progress. The one thing that we can't fulfill through our mentoring program is the role of sponsorship, which often happens internally by leaders. And that's sort of the next steps. If you really want to see those numbers move at a senior level, you need leaders to support rising talent and give them the stretch assignments, give them the connections, give them the opportunities to be able to succeed. So we've been spending a lot of time on the role of being an effective sponsor and highlighting the benefits to senior management of being an effective sponsor. It improves your leadership skills, you get more access to information on what is happening within the business. But more importantly, you're building your own legacy. All of us can think of people who've helped us helped us in our careers. Jenny's one of them, who's connected a lot of us to people and has been promoting and advocating for us. And it builds up your own legacy. Why wouldn't you want people supporting you, working hard for you, talking about you 10 years later? So those are the points that we're you're making, there are benefits to you for being a mentor and a sponsor as well. And I'll finish with visibility, the importance of visibility, of seeing more women in mid and senior roles. When we look at our data set and you carve it out between investment team members where there's no senior women in the investment team and ones which do, there is a marked difference between the representation of women at mid, junior levels and overall. So if you don't have a woman in the senior team, the overall representation of women is 17%. But if you do, and if we split our data set, 23%, if you've got at least one woman in the senior team, it's around 23% overall. You move from having 17% overall women in the team to 30%. And that representation level increases at junior and mid levels as well. So that's the impact of having at least one senior woman in your investment team. You have more women overall and in mid and junior roles. So that's another reason why it matters, and people need to see it to be able to believe it and move forward.
That's a fantastic start, Gabs, because it's given us not only the perspective, this is the situation as we see it now, you've done the research, but also you can see the impact when actions are taken. And I think that cascade effect, when women are there in the team, and this brings so many more, it's that see it, isn't it? See it, the visibility of that, and that role model is such an important area that we will no doubt come back to. Kinga, you have obviously a huge community to draw on to give you, insights and knowledge and perspective on this, and it would be great for you to share with us some of the things that you've been seeing in the market and the roles and challenges that women are facing. So do tell us about that, and then perhaps continuing with that, things that you've seen working well in the market as well, both at public and private level. Thank you.
Thanks. Great to be here. Some of these numbers that Gerbs just mentioned, having around 15% of senior women in venture and also in private equity, as I take it, is a similar number that we also identified when we looked at women with a leadership title. You often can't tell because websites tend to model people's roles, and unfortunately what tends to happen is quite a few funds list women as managing partners or general partners, but they don't have any shares in the general partnership, or very few. So that's a very unfortunate thing. But when we try to dig into that, it's very untransparent, so we don't actually know. What we did manage to understand is that women manage around 9% of assets under management. And so right there is the gap. They're 50% of partners, but they manage 9% of assets. So that's already wrong. And out of that need is really why European Women in VC was born, because I'm patient zero. I raised a fund and couldn't raise a second one. I went to public institutions, they refused me 3 times. First they told me I don't have a track record. Then they told me my track record does not have A16Z next to it, and that's the kind of brand I need to have to be able to raise a fund. So that's how European Women in VC was started. It's basically a startup where I decided to fix this. And so out of that, without any public funding of any kind, this community was born just by the private market funding it. And from that we realized that networks and communities are not the answer. The answer is the asset allocator. So in 2021, we published a white paper with the European Commissioner where we said, look, dear European Commission, you need to build a 3 billion fund of funds to anchor female-led venture firms. Did that happen? No, it didn't. Yes, there were changes in strategies, and it's great that it's moving in that direction, but that level of asset allocator hasn't been fixed. And that's the one that needs fixing. In the meantime, the UK has tried to do it. So myself and Jenny have been involved in a women backing women fund of funds. And I managed to get it to £130 million first close. And now I'm taking the lessons learned from that to be doing a similar thing in Europe. I just want to say that in this whole progress, this isn't about networking and communities. This is about real money. And until that money really gets allocated to decision makers that control GP stakes, control budgets, and control strategies, we're going to be just stuck in rooms talking. And that's not what we want. So, for me, the clear solution is this. It's where does the money actually go? And I think the big privilege is really that a lot of venture funding is taxpayer-led. Therefore, there is an opportunity to shift strategy. And that shift has happened already. It's moving in the right direction. But it's really the beginning. And that shift needs to accelerate. It needs to allocate the real capital and make sure that women are actually owning the general partnership shares and getting a fair carry allocation. So if there's anything, this is what I think is working in some places and needs to work so much more. Anything that we can do to support that, very happy to do. So very glad that Jana, Jenny and the others are trying to make this direction accelerate. But honestly, it's really a baby step, and we need to now be at graduation level of university.
Thanks so much, and that's a really long perspective on this, which is very, very valuable. And that point about capital share, ownership of capital share, is so fundamental. We know, as we also has already heard today, that many women are building funds that are suboptimal as well. And this is another big challenge. Putting sufficient money into the hands of those women in venture capital and private equity is so important, alongside that decision making on deployment. So thank you, Kinga, and we totally agree with your points about it's time to move to graduation level on this, and I think we all agree there's a lot more to do. And Angela, I'm telling you because I think we all have this perspective on the Nordics and obviously Norway, that it's somewhere where they've got the equality and parity bit worked out, and we're all seeing them as examples. In fact, Gert's figures were also very, very positive. But as someone who came from South America and kind of dived in there and took a really, first of all, helicopter view and then got in there, what is your perspective on this? First of all, the landscape there that you saw for women in investing, but also the important actions you've been taking to build women as business angels and early stage investors.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Great to be in a room with like-minded people. We should get some non-like-minded people in the room as well, so we can convert them. Yes, the perspective from the Nordics is an interesting one. I think that the Nordics are seen from the outside as we got it all figured out. There's no such thing. For one thing, at the beginning of everything I've done within creating vehicles for more women to become investors. First business angels, and then becoming the LPs that your funds need, and coming into the leadership of funds, and just filling out the value chain. It was actually the lack of networks, the lack of role models, the lack of vehicles, the lack of possibilities. And in the Nordics, it's not a matter of money, which was very surprising to me. It's a matter of understanding the opportunity. And I remember just very recently, after I moved to Norway, seeing that the startup community was really non-existent. It was, risk capital was nothing to talk about. All the money would go to oil and gas, shipping, construction, very traditional industries, and women were nowhere to be seen when it came to actually being close to innovation. Not only on the deploying capital, but actually voting with their wallets on the solutions they wanted to see in the market. So that was the starting point of creating something that I wanted to belong to. I wanted to belong to be part of a network of investors. I wanted not only to work in the industry, I also wanted to invest. And I didn't see it, I didn't find it, so I decided to create it. I think that was a bold decision that I didn't know it was going to work out well. Nobody told me that as a South American I couldn't do it, so I just surrounded myself with Norwegian and Swedish and Danish women, and we decided to do it.
Thanks. And then if I just kind of ask you a little bit about, what really started to work well to build women as investors around you, women who, as you said, were not having that opportunity up to now, and what kind of impact you've seen from creating a community, creating syndication, which we see as very much, as you know, particularly those of us in the angel community, we see syndication as being that core. But generally in venture capital, building women in communities, but for making those investment decisions. Tell us about that, and then really how we move that forward.
Thank you for that question, because I think this is fundamental at any point in that value chain of VC, private equity, whatever, private investments. I think that what we've seen that has seen our success factors is, number one, visibility. So when we have someone who has dared to take the step and to become an investor, or to say, okay, I'm going to invest in this fund, we lift up that possibility, because when we see ourselves identified with someone else, we in a way see that as permission to become as well. I was saying before that it's not a direct consequence of the amount of money available, is maybe that permission or that invitation to become. That's number one. Number two, we decided to lower our entry ticket size. So for many women, and it's not the money, but it's the mentality behind it. It was, how can I become an investor, and changing the mentality from I need to be very wealthy to be one, to actually I'm going to do this. We lower the ticket size, and we have always spread out the investment from their part into several capital calls. So the impact on the pocket is a little bit lower, the impact on the mindset is a little bit lower, and then they dare. That was number two. And number three is participation and influence in the decision making. The fact that we could not, it's not about, and this is a different thing when it comes to syndicates and VC. In VC, you put your money into general partner, and then you come back some years later and you get your investment multiplied by something, hopefully. In our case, so we could lower the barrier and to invite more women to come along, what we did was to invite them into the sourcing of the deals, into the due diligence process, into the decision making, into the investment committee and the decision making. So being able to be part of that and the learning by doing, but also doing it together. It's impossible to know it all. And you also need, we're women, we're perfectionists. And and we have a thing, I'm not saying that we're risk averse, but we do have a thing with risk. This is my reading after 15 years working in this industry. It is easier when we do it together, when you're thinking, I'm going to make this decision, but I'm listening to her, and to her, and to her, and together we're making a good decision. And that has helped us to open the doors and to invite many, and many have come. So far, just to give you an example, when we started, we started with courses, how to invest in startups. We have launched 2 vehicles so far, fully invested, all of them, or those 2, and now we're launching a new one. The first one was a 100,000 euro micro nano fund or investment company. It was a syndicate. The second one was 50,000, and now we're going for 1 million. So I'm sorry, 500,000, and now we're going for 1 million. And this is really pushed by the community. Do it again. This time, first time I was afraid. Second time I was thinking about it. Now I'm ready. Do it again. So this is, I think that this, what I'm saying now is an invitation to rethink the way we do things and to reimagine a more inclusive ecosystem by reimagining the way we set up the rules of the game.
Thanks very much. And I think that, that building women's confidence into investing is absolutely fundamental. And we know this especially for the angel community, but obviously the lessons learned will be the same for anyone building women into investment. This thing about women daring to do it, and I totally agree, it's definitely not risk averseness among women, although that assumption is frequently made. It's risk awareness, and then we just want to kind of dig down and get it, and once we get it, we can do it. But thank you for that, Angela. So now we're going to really move on to a question that I want you all to speak about, is let's now, as you started to do, Angela, reimagine that landscape. Let's imagine, we've all been setting targets of 2025, we didn't make that one, 2030, are we going to make that one? What are we going to achieve? But also, what would that be that we needed to do to really get there and start to really feel that women can have that absolutely strong and active, but not only that, leading role in making investments. And so, first of all, what's your vision for this? But what needs to change? What needs to be done? I'll loop back to you, Gurpreet, just to kind of give your thoughts on this from a kind of overview perspective as well. Thank you.
So it's a big question, and there's lots you could do. When we get our feedback through, as we're running our research program, there are so many different points that are raised, and I think at the end of the day, it depends on where an individual firm is with respect to its own gender representation. But if I think more broadly, and I think about it in terms of industry, ecosystem, and policymakers, and industry level, we need to just persist. We need to continue our efforts to improve the inclusivity of our working environments, to keep up the efforts to increase representation of women across all roles, but particularly those leadership roles. Careers like private equity and venture capital are apprenticeship careers. It does take time to build out your track record, and one of the areas that is potentially delaying promotions or making it a bit more challenging at the moment is just the broader market for fundraising, for exits, for having those opportunities to demonstrate your track record and build it out. Just the general uncertainty from an economic, geopolitical perspective also can make things a bit challenging. However, that's also where this industry thrives. So I often say when you're working in a challenging environment, that's when you can really build out your career. So you just need to keep persisting, and we keep talking about resilience. A few of us were talking about the importance of resilience last night. Again, I'm going to reiterate my same point from earlier. Leaders do need to sponsor rising talent. I'm talking about across all genders, because there is a lot of talent out there, but opportunity is sometimes not as easily accessible. Now, the wider ecosystem can help increase the visibility of women. So it's great for us to all be here and network, but often you go to conferences and you don't see as many women on the agenda. So that's one area, and I know some conference providers are trying really hard, but industry associations, other groups can work really hard to get some more female voices out there. I do think networks are incredibly important, and we run as a professional network because it helps develop long-term relationships. This is an incredibly long-term industry, and it will lead to business opportunities, the opportunities to invest alongside your peers. So again, the ecosystem driving these networks is important. But if you're a policymaker sitting in the room and you're thinking about what you could be doing, some of the themes that come through our research are consistent across the continent, and they include increasing increasing awareness about careers in finance and investment and entrepreneurship. Often there's asymmetric information and this starts quite early on between men and women, particularly young women and men, around what it means to be in this industry. So how can you increase awareness of being part of it? Thinking about how you support families, because that could help support some of the socio-cultural points that we come across in our work. When you see our report later this autumn, you'll see we will have plotted a matrix. So we'll plot countries by where we feel that the focus is on recruitment and where it's on retention, but we also plot the matrix by areas where we think firms and organisations can drive cultural change and improvements. And areas where we think actually it's much more embedded within society than the challenges are. And I often find that's linked to the availability of childcare, the affordability of it, the schooling system. If your country makes it harder for you to be a parent, that does have a knock-on effect on your family life. And it's not just about children, it's also about elder care as well. So that's where policymakers, I think, can think creatively about how you can get more people into the workforce, increase GDP, increase productivity and so forth. And that's an area that comes up quite frequently. So those are the points that I would highlight. But mostly just keep at it, keep persisting, because we are making progress. This is a long-term industry and it will take time to drive change.
Thanks, Gurs. I mean, this is evidence of actions that are being taken, and you've seen the impact. It's just presumably the scale really that we're lacking at the moment. There are exemplars of things that can be done, but how we scale that and how we really spread the word. And I guess that's really very much a part of all of our role, but obviously your organisation is very much leading on that. We'll come back to kind of things that we think might be, let's all be bold and think what also can happen at kind of European level as well in a moment. But I will turn to you, Kinga, because you have been looking at the whole kind of European scene and obviously looking at it over some time as well in terms of what actions that the European Commission has been taking as well. So just in your imagination now, what would you like to see and what have you been seeing is working and starting to make a difference, and what more of this thing? We're talking about graduation here, as you said, so what more can we do?
Yeah, indeed, graduation. I'm a big fan, and we did spend significant time actually bringing this to the table, but of these definitions of the gender lens criteria at the level of asset allocation. So what the EIF is doing now, it needs to go a few steps more, but I'm a big fan of this initiative, and what I think is missing is taking this to the national fund of funds. Because ultimately women end up raising money locally, first of all. So the National Fund of Funds is the first one they will end up with as their anchor investor. They also tend to be much faster than the EIF in providing capital. So logically, they should be the ones pushing this topic forward first before you get to the sort of next level. And I think that is a clear role for the Commission and for the EIF because it is working well and we see it in the data, but now it's time to also go to the national level. Now, in that way, there are countries that are already doing this. And they have been very good at it, they talk about it, they promote it, and they live it. So, as an example, in Sweden, there is a National Fund of Funds that only backs mixed teams. In Finland, it's also a very big aspect of the way that venture firms are being backed, and a few other countries. I think what we need is to make sure that in each and every geography, this standard is being implemented and upgraded as we move forward. I think that really can work very, very well. And then the thing that can also augment this is ensuring the private sector comes in. So it's not enough to have public capital, we need the private capital. And that is the area that in some places works well, where women want to back women, where men want to back women and become LPs, and where whole institutions are quite interested in seeing really the future of Europe as inclusive and as one that drives forward returns and impact. We need more of that. And I think that works well in places, but if we can do this second thing, that would be very, very good for many asset managers.
No, thank you very much, and I think that is so important now because we tend to shy away from sort of what's happening in a country by country level. We hear of things, but how are we spreading that good practice? How are we spreading? How far? And obviously, you talk about this in due course, but how far? Setting targets. As we've seen with the IF. Which is, which has been taking real leadership in this, I agree. How far can we actually encourage that across all other markets? I know in the UK it's an absolute hot potato, bone of contention that we try to do this at national level, and there's a lot of shying away. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well this afternoon, our commitment to action and people using codes and charters to help set priorities. But I think this is an important area for us to tackle. And we all have national funds in our countries, and therefore we need to think of what inputs we can bring together as well on this. So thank you for that, because in the end, setting those targets and then really making, we won't fund you unless you agree to that, is very fundamental. But I think people also have to feel it, don't they? I mean, we can force it, or we can also make them feel it. So I think we need to think of how we're going. That is where our collective action can help as well, and the examples of success and change. So Angela, you were about to reimagine your world there in Norway, and I think it's interesting to hear there are some interesting examples of things in Sweden and Finland, but as you said to me, you did arrive in Viking land, and this was very much, thinking of everything we have in these images that you just slightly dispelled for us. But what is that world that you now would like to see, and what do you think changes need to happen? I mean, talk about it obviously from the perspective of Norway, but obviously widely, of course.
Thank you. Yes, there are so many things to say about that, how to reimagine a better landscape and a better present and future. But I would say that I have to back both of what has been said before, policy and definitely persistence and resilience. I think, but also we need to claim our own agency. I think that's the part of, it's very easy to say, if the European Commission would do that and the national funds would do that and whatever. I think it's important to actually celebrate the achievements we've had so far, make them visible, allow them to give us hope, and to really work. I think we're doing a pretty good job, and I want to believe that we're moving forward as women, as our community, as working together, as becoming more, as going higher. But I think we need to make a bigger effort into bringing our counterparts, our male counterparts along. We're not going to achieve any significant change at any single level if they're not on board. Unfortunately, they're still the majority. Unfortunately, they still make the decisions. So we need to continue being clever, showing results, showing data that demonstrate how good investors, how good entrepreneurs we can be, the results that we can deliver, the innovation that we can create, the technology that changes, that makes impact. All of that, all those metrics, we need to check in. But also we need to be able to invite them into the room, not to collaborate. I think we need to continue being better at that. So I think that if there's one thing that I wish we can do better, and definitely this is a note to self, is to be closer to our male allies, because and this was my motivation when I joined the steering committee. It was gender-conscious investors. We weren't only women investors, we're gender-conscious investors, and I think that's at the bottom of what we need to reimagine. And definitely in Scandinavia, thank goodness, investors are a little bit more. We can see that definitely Finland, most definitely leading the way. But definitely Sweden following, Norway and Denmark, we're still a little bit behind. We have a lot to learn, but we see that men are more keen into inviting women, into sharing opportunities, deal flow, knowledge, and we need to get there more and more.
Thanks, Angela. A point very well made, and one that where, as a network, we do have men, not enough women, we'd love more men, and I am delighted to say we do have one very, very good male ally who will be speaking today about actions that he is taking in this area. But I would just want to pass that point back along the line, since we have just a few more minutes just to kind of react to that, because I think it's something we all have to tackle, and I totally agree with you. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, speaking to the broader industry is crucial, otherwise we're just preaching to the choir and speaking to ourselves. So industry engagement is a big part of the work that we do at Level 20. We speak to firms directly, we speak to the HR teams, we speak to leaders within those organisations, and to put this into context and not embarrass the man but even further. If you look at our data set, the top 50 names, within the top 50 names there are only 2 female names. The most popular name is David. So you're going to hear from a David later on today.
Surprise!
If you added together the Toms and Thomases, they'd be the most popular name. But out of that top 50, the first female name, distinctly female name, comes in at 28, and it's Laura. And the next one comes in at 46, and it's Maria. But if you're a Maria, you're more likely to be senior as well. So just to contextualise it, when we talk about these numbers as percentages, it's also helpful to see that. And one point I would make is that if you aggregated all the senior male investment professionals, there are more of them than there are women working across all levels altogether. So it's incredibly important that we work with our male allies. 50% of our mentors are men. They value the programme for all the reasons I was giving earlier as well. So to make it more inclusive, we also need to be inclusive ourselves.
Thanks so much. And Kinga, I'll give you the last one.
Well, I agree completely. We need to work with our male allies, and really that's the key thing. We need to build the track records that way. And I think what we really want is to make sure that women are invited into the top transactions. And if that's one thing that we can work on, it should be this. So every time you have an initiative like a Project Europe, I don't know how many of you know about that one, there were no women in it, and then there's a few. So every time we have a very cool new initiative, we need to make sure that the women are benefiting from the returns on that, because that really fuels the whole wheel moving forward. And so it is very much about being led into the right deals, bringing in the value, bringing in the customers to the scale-ups, bringing in the networks, and really bringing in this added value of not just putting in a ticket, but actually also delivering something on top. And that way, you build a reputation, you build this track record, and it sort of has a snowball effect, because in the end, you can help more women be in that same boat.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we don't have time for questions, but I do want to leave you all with a thought. As we've just said, what can we do, what can you do as an individual to help accelerate that change? And how many men can you bring along with you on that journey? Thank you very much. Thanks to my great